Fiery sage. The sword of Gideon broke, bringing chaos and the great conflict. We know Gideon from the Old Testament of the Holy Bible. Another name for him is also Jerubbaal. The angel of the Lord appeared to him, saying that he was of the tribe of Manasseh. The angel of the Lord's angelic messenger, came in the character of a traveler who sat down in the shades of the terebinth tree to enjoy the little refreshment and repose, and entered into conversation with Gideon. The narrative echoes a meeting of Abraham with the visitors, the three angels of God. The angel greeted Gideon. "The Lord is with you, you mighty man of valor." Gideon requested proof of God's will by three miracles. First, the sign from the angel, in which the angel appeared to Gideon and caused fire to shoot up out of a rock. And then two signs involving a fleece, performed on consecutive nights and the exact opposite of each other, with the dew on the fleece. First, Gideon woke up with his fleece covered in dew, but the surrounding ground dry. Then the next morning his fleece was dry, but the surrounding ground covered in dew. In God's instruction, Gideon destroyed the town altar to Baal and the symbol of the goddess Asheroth beside it, receiving the byname of Jerubbaal from his father. Therefore, in that day Joash, called him Jerubbaal, saying, "Let Baal plead against him, because he hath thrown down his altar." And he gathered an army in order to go against the Midianites. And this was this happened during a night attack. God instructed Gideon to approach the Midianite camp. There Gideon overheard the Midianite men tell a friend of a dream in which a loaf of barley bread tumbled into the camp of Midian, causing their tent or camp to collapse. It was interpreted as meaning that God had given the Midianites over to Gideon. So never before in history have such a large and shocking events occurred together. From 2020 onwards, within 3 years, it's as if the gates of hell were open for everyone and everything. And this is written by a fiery scholar. Gideon was the first of a very important biblical group, that of the so-called judges. This is before Israel had kings. This group consisted of people who had superhuman powers that came from divine grace, or as we say today, something like a group with special powers, as they are called today by the designers of the superhero industry of Marvel or DC Comics. The judges, according to sacred tradition, were, let's say, the custodians of the faith. Whenever the Jews had long periods of peace and prosperity, they forgot God and his commandments, worshipping mainly foreign deities, such as Baal, for example, who was worshipped by the neighboring peoples of the Jews: Syrians, Babylonians, Palestinians, Canaanites, and even ancient Greeks, of course. And he taught a completely different way of life that was based mainly on pleasures and carnal worship. And from this tendency towards the most literal forms of life, they lost the grace of God, with the usual result of their enslavement. The judges had exactly this mission: to awaken them by controlling them, and sometimes to lead the effort for liberation from enslavement. The first of these, Gideon, was particularly popular. He knew the way to bring them back to the true faith, and he was the terror of the neighboring people, and especially those who lived in the so-called Median land, or the Midianites. Precisely in this land where the Palestinians live today, that is where the Gaza Strip is located. Notably, these Midianites had enslaved the Jews, and in fact much more easily than they expected, until Gideon came as judge along with his sword. Gideon always having with him his sword of terrible power, which according to Jewish tradition had been given to him by the angel Gabriel himself, and the command of God, managed with only a handful of fighters that did not even exceed 300, not to only defeat the Midianites, but also to literally flatten the land of Midian and make it part of the land of Israel. No one could escape the power of the sword he always carried with him, and when the wars and their lives ended, Jews returned to tranquility. Gideon dedicated his sword to God and occupied himself only with the duties of a judge, which mainly concerned religious matters. But Gideon's sword had the fate of the Ark of the Covenant. covenant. I mean, it just disappeared off the face of the earth. No one knows where the Ark of the Covenant is. No one knows where Gideon's sword is. When Gideon died and his son Abimelech took over the reins of the family, he looked everywhere for that terrible sword, that awesome sword, that would establish him as the mightiest of the men of the mighty, but in vain. The sword was gone, just like the Ark of the Covenant. After the destruction of Jerusalem by the army of Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon. But it never ceased to be a sacred symbol for the Jews, symbolizing the invincibility of their army, especially in the new era from the establishment of their state in 1947 onwards, and especially after the Six-Day War, where the Israelite army literally leveled everything in its path. The symbolism of Gideon's sword was very great. If one excludes the unfortunate war of 1973 between Egypt and Israel, that took the name Yom Kippur War, from this great Jewish holiday of atonement, where while Israel, despite the surprise it had suffered, had turned from one point and then the game in its favor, but in the end forced to cede the Sinai region to Anwar Sadat's Egypt in the end for the sake of reconciliation and peace in the Middle East. The Israeli army, which even today carries the famous sword of Gideon on its coat of arms, never lost another battle, were the descendants of the Medians, hence the Palestinians, but also with the other Arab Muslims. And of course there were frictions, that is indisputable, but they were never capable of creating a serious existential issue in the Jewish state. But on October 7th of this year, 2023, again, the day of Yom Kippur holiday, history repeated itself, and indeed on a new, more dangerous level. This time the surprise did not come from the Egyptians, but from the Madianite Palestinians of Hamas. The symbol is terrifying, but all the more painful because of the absolute surprise. This time the sword of Gideon, quote unquote, that no longer had divine grace, broke. Israel, perhaps for the first time in the new era of its history, felt true humiliation, a humiliation that will be etched in the memories of all Jews, perhaps the whole world, East and West. And nothing is the same from now on, but for today's Israel as we know it, and for all humanity. One thing is certain, we're facing terrible events that were known to us anyway. Of course, we, the dumb and stupid, waited anxiously for someone to get into action. God certainly laughed at our naivety, but even more so at the desperation that afflicts us. We know everything and our blindness together. Of course, God brought this to us instead of the sword of Gideon broke not just for Jews, maybe for all of us. What I have to say is an epithemium. It is to intensify our prayers to the Most High, because we don't know if this fast approaching Christmas will be our last or not. We'll see each other again soon. May God have mercy on us all. This was from Fiery Scholar. I've translated this for you from Greek article. Please leave your comments, and thank you for your support. Please support my Patreon account. The daily posts are 5 videos daily, and they are totally different from what I have on my YouTube channel. Thank you so much for your support, and that you find all my content so interesting. You'll find the Patreon account details in the description box below.